Good morning. This is Depelsha McGruder, the founder of Mob United. Hope everyone is doing well. I am live in Washington, D.C. from the Congressional Black Caucus Legislative Conference, and just wanted to share a few updates with the group on what we've been doing here the past few days and some of the things that we've learned. So hopefully the background noise that just started, of course, when I went live, won't be too distracting and will go away. But first of all, before I start with the update, I just wanted to let you know that at the end of this post, I'm going to share how you can win your own Mob United t-shirt, so stay tuned for that. I'm also going to have a special guest joining me shortly to talk about an event that we co-hosted here Thursday night, a screening and panel discussion, so stick around for that. But for now, I just want to share a little bit about some of the panel discussions that we sat in on and some of the key learnings. So the first session I attended was called it was hosted by Congressman William Lacy Clay of Missouri, and it was about the 13th Amendment and the history of policing in America. This was a very riveting conversation. There were representatives from law enforcement, from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, from National Urban League. There was someone from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. So really a rich panel full of insights. And they talked about, honestly, many of the things that we talk about all the time in Mob United, such as the school-to-prison pipeline, how preschool suspensions are driving it at a very early age. They talked about the impact of having law enforcement officers in schools, unfair sentencing laws, and the impact of private prisons. A lot of talk about the profitability of private prisons and how it's really hard to break down the prison industrial complex. One of the more interesting insights I thought, though, came from Dr. Philip Goff, who is a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, but he's also the president and co-founder of something called the Center for Policing Equity. And they're building a national database. It's called the National Justice Database, where they're actually tracking police conduct nationwide. And one of the things he shared is that their data shows that early contact with police at a young age, meaning being stopped, harassed, etc., when you're doing nothing wrong, actually increases crime. People don't think about it that way, but their data actually showed that when young black men are continually stopped and harassed and questioned and they're actually doing nothing wrong, it actually disincentivizes them from following the rules. Because the logic goes, if I'm following the rules and I'm doing the right thing and I'm still getting stopped and harassed, what's the point of following the rules? So I thought that was very interesting. Someone from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund also shared a little bit on what they found about why good officers don't speak up when their colleagues abuse people. And she was saying that they've heard officers say that if they speak up, if they tell, that when they call for backup, when they're out in the streets, their fellow officers won't come. So they're literally putting their lives on the line by speaking up because they won't have the protection of that fraternal brotherhood when they're calling for backup. There was also a lot of talk about the importance of being exactly what we're trying to do, proactive, engaged, showing up. The officer on the panel said that most of the time when they have community forums, the people who need to show up, who they need to hear from on these issues, don't show up. So that's the narrative that we are definitely trying to change in Mob United, showing up to ask to speak to police chiefs, showing up to talk to your DA about your issues, showing up in city council meetings, at state legislative hearings, etc. One of the best connections I would say I made here is I had the opportunity to meet Clarence Cox. He's the president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And it's actually an organization that we targeted and been researching for a while for potential partnership. They have chapters nationwide. They're doing a lot of stuff around training, the public on how to interact with law enforcement. So we're definitely going to follow up on how we might be able to partner with them. But it's called NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. We also attended a panel yesterday on criminal justice reform, making America accountable for black lives. On this one, similar issues. They talked about the school-to-prison pipeline and how black communities are policed differently than other communities. So they gave the example, if you're a student in an Ivy League school and you're smoking a joint, there's likely no police anywhere around, so you're not going to be arrested. But if you're living in a black community and you do the same crime, there are going to be lots of police, you're going to be stopped, you're going to be prosecuted. So that's what leads to the increase in arrest and imprisonment of our sons. Other communities are just policed very differently, and that's a big contributing factor. They also talked about how police are evaluated. They're evaluated based on number of arrests. They're not evaluated based on community engagement or how well they get to know the community they serve. So whatever you measure is what you're going to get. And so if they're evaluated on arrests, they're going to do more arrests. Another interesting thing that came up in a number of panels is talking about how training isn't sufficient. So we talk a lot about just giving officers better training, But their point was the training isn't going to overcome the culture. So if the training is counter to the culture, and particularly the culture of the leadership of that law enforcement agency, if they're not supporting the training, so you go through the training, then it's kind of mocked, it could actually have a backlash effect. So they talked about the fact that training isn't sufficient. There was also a lot of talk here in multiple panels about not writing off violent offenders. So often when we talk about criminal justice reform, we talk about it in terms of reforming for nonviolent offenders versus violent offenders. And they cautioned against doing that because when you think about it, so many of our young black males are coerced into taking plea deals, into pleading guilty for things that they did not commit because they just don't think they're going to get justice from the system. And some of those are violent crimes. So they were saying that you can't just write those people off from society because they're charged and convicted of a violent crime, and that they deserve, some of them deserve a chance at life after they've been rehabilitated and have served their time. So that was, I think, the first day or day and a half. Yesterday, I attended 2 panels. One was called The Resistance, an intersectional strategy session, and this was really a powerhouse panel with people like Alicia Garza, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. Angela Rye was the moderator, Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour from the Women's March, Rashad Robinson of Color of Change, and Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality. So this was really all about intersectionality and how our issues are all connected and related and how we have to work together to affect change. So the final panel that I attended yesterday was the only one that was specifically focused on black males this year. Last year there was a much bigger focus, I would say, on black males, but this year they shifted to very specifically and overtly reminding people that black women and girls are also a victim of police brutality and killing. So there was a shift to focus more on that conversation. But this panel was hosted by Congresswoman Frederica Wilson of Florida, and it was called Policing Black Men and Boys Are the Odds Against Them. So they talked about many of the same issues. They talked about how police officers have a lot of leeway in when they can decide to use deadly force, and they can get away with it based on the current laws, but pointed out that just because something is technically legal doesn't mean it's necessary. So you don't always have to use the most extreme type of force that's legal. And someone suggested that we need to have citizens review boards that looks at all cases when police are involved in shootings, so that you don't just have the legal system, you have citizens who are actually reviewing the facts as well and weighing in. And in this panel, I actually asked a question. I told them we're a nationwide coalition of moms. We want to raise our voices. We're organizing, we're mobilizing, we're forming chapters. And I asked, if they were advising us one policy change that we can push for all together that they think would have the biggest impact. I have to say I was a little disappointed in the answer because it really wasn't a policy answer, but the answer that I got was from Paul Butler, who's a professor at Georgetown University, and he said that he thinks that the biggest impact would be made if there are more female police officers, because the data shows that women aren't as likely to shoot. So that is most of the conference wrap-up. Ralph, I have a special guest joining me. So Thursday night, as he's coming over here, Thursday night, we co-hosted a screening and panel discussion here in D.C. at Busboys and Poets, and we partnered with Social Cinema. This is Ralph Scott from Social Cinema, so
Hello.
I just want to bring him in. So first of all, thank you for joining me on this Saturday morning. You're talking to thousands of moms all around the country,
Hello,
moms of black
thousands
sons.
moms all across the country.
And I just want you to first tell us, what is Social Cinema and why did you start it?
Okay, Social Cinema is a showcase of compiled short films, or sometimes long-form films, that speak to a certain social issue. So years ago, I had a program called Visual AIDS. And Visual AIDS was, again, a compilation of short films that dealt with HIV and AIDS. And the call was to get more heterosexual people in the audience. And one of the ways we decided to do that was to showcase the films, get people to come and watch, for want of a better word, a film festival. And then we hit them with all the statistics and all the information and all the safety items that they needed to better their lives. And so from that, I decided, wow, a lot of filmmakers are making films that deal with social issues. What else can you touch on? And I made my own film. My film is called Barbasol, and it's a father and son story, which is another topic, but it touches on mental health. My father dealt with dementia before his passing, and that's a topic that we rarely talk about in an open forum. So in keeping with that, and with the Black Lives Matter movement growing and getting stronger, and the need for some social change in the justice system. I saw that filmmakers once again were making films that touched on these particular topics. So I decided very recently to come to the Black Caucus, because I felt that what's a better way to get these films to make a change is to get to the policymakers. And the Congressional Black Caucus was one of those places, and the rest is almost history.
Right, and that's the same reason we're here. You have to go to where the decisions are being made. Absolutely. And try to influence those people. So can you just tell us a little bit about the films we showcase on Thursday?
Yeah, well, we had a film called Stop by Ronaldo Green. He's an accomplished filmmaker out of New York. It was about a young man who gets stopped by the police. Well, first I should say that it starts as he's talking about his college aspirations. So you already get a sense of this isn't the stereotypical young man that you see get stopped by the police. And in New York, some of you may be familiar with a law. I think they banished it, but a law that was called Stop and Frisk, where they had the right to stop and frisk or go through the personal items of someone if they thought that they were suspect of anything. But it was so open-armed that they would just stop young black men, one, to harass them, but to see if they had anything. And more times than not, they might have a little drugs, some drugs, or they might have a weapon, or anything that they would see that cause for arrest. So
now, I never asked you, did he have drugs in his book bag? Because he
yes.
went home, like well, we don't want to ruin it if you see the film, but he gets stopped by the officer doesn't find anything, then he goes home and he's really shook up by the experience, right?
Yes.
But then he goes into some other section of his bag where he did have something, so he was spared, right? I meant to ask you, I never was quite clear on that.
Yeah, because, well, in filmmaking, you make a film a certain way, and if your projection doesn't match the quality of the film, you won't see some of the nuance that's happening in the film. So it was unfortunate that it was a little dark on some of the aspects of that film. But yes, he had something and he did away with it. Mm-hmm. So, but the film was called Stop.
Right.
So there's a metaphor there in terms of stop and frisk, stop harassing young black men, stop carrying drugs in your bag, stop. Stop. Mm-hmm. So. And there's other films. There's a film, a very interesting film that took a twist on the whole movement, where these two young people were, they had designed, which I love that, because you have two young black, they were kids basically.
Right.
And they designed what should I say, a Wayback Machine.
A time machine.
A time machine, thank you.
A time machine to go back in time to try to stop tragic events from happening.
Right. And so the young lady, her brother obviously had been killed, and she wanted to go back in time to prevent him from being killed. I won't tell you how it turns out.
Right, but it was very interesting, and I think it just, in a very clever way, spoke to the pain that we feel as relatives who lose people to this kind of violence. All they wanted to do was go back and relive it and figure out how they could stop this from happening. So they made their time machine. They're like, oh, if we can just stop the robbery, if we can stop them from walking down this street. And, it just really illustrated the pain that we feel when we lose someone.
And not only that, no matter what you do,
you can't stop it. Right, that was the other lesson.
Right. There was a film about ESPN has a series called 30 for 30. You may have heard of that. Mm-hmm. And one of the films is made by Spike Lee, and it's called Two Fists Up. I think you can see it online. Look up Two Fists Up by Spike Lee. I think you get the whole thing online. But it talks about the Ferguson movement, the Black Lives Matter Ferguson movement, but how that led to some racial animosity on their campus of what's the name of the school? Missouri University?
University of Missouri.
University of Missouri, thank you. And how they had a protest on campus, and a young man decided to do a hunger strike, but that wasn't getting the attention that they deserved. And so the football team heard about this guy going on a hunger strike, and they're like, well, we're going to stand by you in your protest, and we're going to not play. And once they stopped playing, that's when the media attention arrived, and the president stepped down. So, in terms of a movement, there are certain things that you have to do. But my point when I show that film is media is a way to make things happen. Media is a way to destroy a people. It can also be a way to bring people back. So when you use media in a way that, so in other words, by the football team not playing alone, it was stated in the movie that, okay, so they might have lost $1 million or so. They could have helped. They could have dealt with that. But that media attention that they got from that football team not playing made the difference, because ESPN was talking about it, the president was talking about it. So Obama, by the way,
right, the real president.
The real president. Well, I mean, even Trump. I mean, I'm sorry.
Trump actually was in the movie too, speaking about it, of course, from the opposite side.
Right, exactly.
And I just heard today he called it. It's interesting. I just saw today he called the athletes that are protesting, like Colin Kaepernick, sons of bitches. That's his latest statement that I just read about right before going live. So he's nothing but consistent. None of this should be a surprise. And if you look at this movie, which was made how long ago?
I'm not sure the date.
But several years ago. I mean, it was several years ago, around the start of the Black Lives Matter movement, and he's in the movie speaking out against these athletes who spoke up for their rights. So he is very consistent.
The people who are running that college should be ashamed of themselves, and they're weak and they're cowards and all that kind of thing.
Right. So the president ended up stepping down, and he said he was weak and a coward for stepping down and responding to the cries against racial injustice. So I just want to pivot a little bit to talk about the panel discussion, which I co-hosted or hosted, moderated.
Very good job, by the way.
Thank you. These people in the audience don't know how to ask a question, though. They want to tell their life story.
But that's been through the whole weekend.
I know. People want to give speeches instead of ask questions to panelists. But we had a great group of panelists. One was a former D.C. police detective. Another was a guy who's a restorative justice facilitator. We had a woman in the panel who's a law school student. She's a mom of 2 sons, but she's also done a lot around in her own community, peace rallies and police community interactions. But I want to hear your insights. One of the most interesting insights I learned from Mitch Creedle, who was the former officer, was he talked a lot about how police officers are trained. The main thing they learn in training is go home alive. Like, that's number one. Like, make sure you go home alive, not protect and serve, not serve the community. Like, that's not the focus as the top priority. The top priority is making sure you as an officer go home alive. So when you start with that mentality, they do go out into the streets with a sense of fear, a sense of fear of the community. So he talked about that a lot. He also talked about the importance of training. Not training, the importance of recruitment and screening early on, because he said you can't train someone's beliefs away. He said that, policing is a job, not a religion. So it's not like you take this job and you certainly become this honorable, honest, upright citizen. The job doesn't turn you into somebody you weren't. So if you were a thug before, you're still a thug. If you were a racist before, you're still a racist. You're just now a racist police officer. So he thought the point to get in is before they're even hired. And he was actually in favor, as an officer, of psychological screening and a lot more focus on community policing and having people who police neighborhoods, live in those neighborhoods or be from those communities. He thinks that makes a big difference because you just have a familiarity with the people and the culture. Okay, let's see. Okay, he's about to get a ticket. But, okay, thank you, officer. See, there's some nice officers. He just kept on riding. Ralph is parked right here legally. But, so he talked a lot about the importance of recruitment and screening and training. What else did you think was interesting?
I have to admit,
you weren't listening?
When you're running an event, I have to run around and do things, but...
But how do you know I did a good job? You weren't even listening.
I can tell because the engagement of the audience. I'm there to judge the engagement of the audience.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll share another insight. So another insight was from Amin Beal, who's he works at the D.C. Attorney General's office, and he's a restorative justice facilitator. And the whole point of restorative justice is not to put everybody through the system. So say they have a dispute on the street, instead of like arresting the people and putting them through the system, they'll have them come in and talk to each other. Now, I don't know if I want to talk to somebody who punched me in the face or whatever the thing is, but they'll have like the victim and perpetrator sit down and have a mediation to talk about the issue and how they can overcome it, things like that. So he's doing a lot of work. He also talked about how he goes into communities to try to reduce the violence in Southeast DC, like literally getting in the middle of altercations. He talked about housing complexes that, had beefs for years. And one of the things he went in and suggested was a cook-off. So instead of a shoot-off, how about a cook-off? And they embraced it and had like a cook-off between the buildings, and it made people talk to each other who hadn't talked to each other in years and just wouldn't cross that line across buildings. So they're doing some really innovative stuff. And then Vita, who's a mom, who I have to recruit to our organization. She's a
Yes.
mom of 2 sons, and she's doing a lot of work
fire.
here.
Did you see all the stuff that she does?
You want to talk about that? You remember that?
Well, I don't remember all that she
Okay.
does, but I know that she's planned like backpacks for going back to school, and she's planned restorative justice programs, and she has a packet of information on what to do if you're stopped by the police.
Right. So she's doing many of the topics we've hosted here in this group seminar. She's doing that locally here in DC. So definitely want to connect with her because she's hosted police community interaction forums, know your rights seminars, what to do if you're stopped by the police. And she's also working on the other side. The way she came to this is that she came home and her children were talking about the violence they saw at school. Like they came home from school like, oh yeah, somebody got stabbed across the street from my school, somebody got murdered. And they were talking about it like it was normal. She's like, this is not normal. So she felt she had to do something. So she's working on it from all sides in terms of decreasing violence within our community, but also trying to work on the police side of things. So is there anything else you would like to share? I think we want to take this show on the road, so stay tuned for that.
Oh yeah, for sure. We want to take it to different cities and include as many organizations as possible. I know that Congressman Hank Johnson had mentioned that he was very much on board in terms of how this program worked and how it opens up the discussion in a certain way. Because I think what happens is a lot of times you may know of a film screening that touches on a topic, and a congressman or a reverend or a teacher might get a hold of a film and show it and have the filmmaker and talk about the film. It's similar, but when you design a whole event and program around a particular topic, it really makes a difference because you can put different films together. Excuse me, a lot of talking, you go dry.
I know.
You put a lot of films together, and it kind of brings up a point. It brings up things that, like for instance, when I did the HIV and AIDS program, the films sometimes were so emotional. People, of course, would be crying in the audience, but it makes them think about their own circumstance and their own situation to a point where, the conversation kind of goes in a completely different direction.
I agree, and that's the power of media. Media does a lot of harm, but it can also do a lot of good in terms of raising awareness and just opening up people to talk about things that they wouldn't ordinarily talk about. And it just sets the atmosphere. So you can show these films that are thought-provoking, that make people look at things from different perspectives, and then you have the conversation. So it's definitely a model that we want to follow, and I just want to thank you for the partnership and for being a part of this and coming out this morning.
I thank you. I mean, I think this is, Depelsha reached out to me. Come back over here, the lighting. Depelsha reached out to me out of the blue. I've known Depelsha not greatly, but I mean, we've been an acquaintance from her past life at Centric. And who knew that we would actually be working together on this topic?
Right.
And,
so we both come from the world of entertainment, and we're trying to use entertainment for good.
Absolutely. I think you have something else you wanted to.
Yes. Okay. So you're done. Thank you so much for
gotta
joining
go?
us. You can go back and move your car, so
Bye.
you won't get a ticket.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. So I just wanted to share a few other things before I go and head back home. One, I want to encourage everyone to go to the pin post within this group because you have an opportunity to win your own Mob United t-shirt. So go there, check out the pin post, and make sure you sign up so that we can stay in touch with you. I also want to let you know we're going to be hosting our next round of local meetings soon. Over the summer, we had more than 20 Woke Mom meetups in cities all across the country to let people know more about the organization. The next round of meetings will be advocacy training sessions, and we're going to have what we're calling a pink postcard party in different cities where we actually write to our legislators. So we're going to have you write to your legislators in that meeting. So stay tuned for more information on that. Also want to let you know we're launching a fundraising campaign soon for our 501c3 organization, which is the organization that provides resources, information, support for moms and sons directly. So we need to raise money on that front. So stay tuned for those messages. And finally, I want to let you know about an exciting partnership that we have with a professor at San Diego State University to partner on a course called Black Minds Matters. It's all about how black males are taught and engaged in the classroom and what needs to change there. So it's completely on mission, and you're going to have an opportunity to participate in it virtually. So stay tuned for that. So I think that's all for now. I want to thank you for joining. We've had a great time here at CBC. If you've never been to the CBC conference, I highly recommend it. It's not that expensive, and it is chock full of information, whether you're involved in this work or not, on how you can affect change through legislation. So thanks everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Depelsha McGruder, Mob United.